Greetings, everybody, and welcome to my channel, A Magical Life with Ayla. I'm Ayla Hillel, and today we're going to talk about the ego and the profound effect that the ego has on our spiritual growth and personal evolution. So let's get started. So when we think of the ego, what do we think of? The first thing that springs to mind for most of us is this person who, throws up this screen of, I know everything, whatever you've done, I've done more or better. You can't teach me anything because I already know it. And we think of this person who throws out their chest and they have this vibrato about them. So this is the image that many of us get when we think about an egotistical person. That when you think about it, the ego, which comes out of a psychological study, there's the ego and the id. So the id is the child. It's the part of our personality that wants to stay up all night and party and do a bunch of risky stuff and jump out of airplanes and off of cliffs and do all kinds of things that may potentially hurt us or get us into trouble. So the ego is the cautionary parent. It's the part of our personality that says, oh, if we do that, we could get hurt. Now, that's psychological terms. In spiritual terms, we talk about the difference between the ego and the spirit. So the ego is ruled by logic and reason and rationale, and the spirit is ruled by love and compassion and acceptance. But they are inside of us. These are parts of who we are. And so the ego holds the same position as it does in three-dimensional explanation, with a little bit more emphasis on some things we're going to talk about. The spirit is that adventurous part of us that's always wanting to grow, always wanting to go and have experiences, not necessarily dangerous things that could hurt us or get us into trouble, but anything that is going to advance our evolution, our spiritual evolution, or our personal growth. Anything that is going to advance those things for us, the spirit is willing to try it. The ego, on the other hand, is cautionary and parental, and you'll notice, for those of you who have been on an evolutionary path, you will notice that you will reach a certain evolution. You'll reach a certain evolutionary, we call them plateaus, and you get comfortable there. It's like you get comfortable with the knowledge you have. You get comfortable with the wisdom that you've acquired through your experiences, and you want to stay there. The ego is like, oh, this is comfortable, and we know it's safe. But then the spirit is kind of like, let's go up a level. Let's level up. In order to level up, we got to face some darkness. We've got to have some experiences that maybe we don't want to have. I had an evolutionary experience one time that lasted for 6 years. And for 4.5 of those years, I was very, very uncomfortable. So, the ego is like, yeah, but do we really want to go there? I mean, we don't have to if we don't want to. And the ego is absolutely right. You don't have to level up in your evolution and your personal growth if you don't want to. You can reach a certain place, and you can just stay there. So this becomes a very complicated idea, and it's multifaceted. What I'm talking about right now is only one of the observations that you have probably already made if you are on an evolutionary path. And what I mean by if you are on an evolutionary path is that there are folks who are perfectly happy just to live their lives. And that is okay. That's exactly what we come here to do. We come here to live our lives. And then there are people that want to get closer and closer and closer to the divine. And the way you do that is by personal growth and spiritual evolution. It brings you, I look at it in two ways. It's like climbing a ladder or a spectrum. And one end of the spectrum is closer to the divine. The other end of the spectrum is farther away from the divine. We're all on that spectrum. So you can never look at another human being and think to yourself, oh my God, how enlightened. That person may be more disenlightened than you are, but nobody is not on the spectrum. If you come here to live this life, you are on the spectrum of personal growth and spiritual evolution. You just are. It's one of the byproducts of being here. But then on the other hand, another way of looking at this is, I'm certain that certain mystics would scream at me for what I'm about to say, but there's a lot of teachers who think that your ego needs to be dissolved. I disagree. I couldn't disagree more. The divine didn't put anything inside of us that needed to be dissolved. You are perfect just the way you are. So if you are perfect just the way you are, and you've got this thing inside of you that keeps disrupting your personal growth and spiritual evolution, what are you going to do? Well, what is witchcraft all about? There's one word that sums up witchcraft, in my mind, completely. And that word is balance. So what we want to do is we want to balance the ego. Every time the ego starts making you feel afraid, take a look at it, honor it. What is the worst thing that could happen if you do this particular action or activity that could very well bring you into a state of leveling up? What's the worst thing that could happen? Could you be physically hurt? Could you be emotionally hurt? For the action that I took for those 6 years, I was very severely emotionally hurt by another human being. And when I left that situation, it took me a year to heal from that. But then once I healed from that, I recognized the shift in my evolution that had happened, because that situation brought me into so much knowledge and so much wisdom and so many experiences that taught me things. I didn't know going into it that it was going to be as uncomfortable as it is. Normally, our guides and our angels won't tell us if something is going to be uncomfortable. In this particular case, they didn't tell me. They didn't tell me that it was going to be uncomfortable, but what they said was, you don't have to do this now. You can do it later. And I was at a point in my evolution where I kind of figured this thing that was fixing to happen was going to be an evolutionary bump for me. And I wasn't doing anything else. So I was like, all right, I'm kicking around, not really doing anything. So let's go do this and get it over with, basically. So the ego really is, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to say it out loud. You can scream at me if you want to, your best teacher. Because when you start to feel like, I'm going to go have this experience, or I'm going to go do this thing that I know is going to help my evolution, move my evolution, the ego is going to start chattering at you. Let's not do that. It's comfortable here. It's safe here. We know that we're not going to be hurt here. This is good. And like I said before, you have that option. You can stay right where you're at. You never have to take another evolutionary bump or rung or move down the spectrum. You never have to. That is your decision. And in many cases, you'll hear somebody say, that's fine, stay where you're at. And what they mean is, that's fine, stay where you're at and suffer the consequences. That is not what I am saying at all. I want to be perfectly clear about that. You have a choice. When you come into this third dimensional earthly life, you have a choice in every aspect of your life. And you might think, well, I wrote this down on the other side. I really wanted to do it this way. You know what? It's okay. There's no rush. Because if you don't get all aspects of this life plan met, you may get to the other side and you may choose to come back. It may be so important to get those other aspects met that you choose to come back. From what I understand, there's a myriad of ways to meet certain aspects of our evolution. And you don't have to come back. You can do other things. I don't know what those other things are, sorry, but I have heard that there's other things that we can do. So the ego is very powerful for us, helping us grow, helping us identify where we want to navigate our evolution. Now, on the other side, spiritually, we already know that three-dimensionally the ego can be very damaging. If you are an egotistical person, people probably are not going to want to be around you a lot, because that's a really hard thing to take. Sitting and being around and listening to a person's ego chattering all the time, watching them make mistakes based on their ego, that's really difficult. Now, spiritually, it can be difficult as well. Your ego can absolutely distract you and kind of mess your evolution up. We get into positions where I've seen this happen with lots of spiritual teachers, where they start off fine. They start off brilliant, and you're listening to them, and you're listening to them, and you're listening to them, and all of a sudden, it starts to sound a little weird. Well, nobody can teach me. I remember feeling a point like I couldn't find a person to teach me. And so I reached out to the powers and I said, I've got this question. I don't even know what this question is. I don't even know how to ask this question, but there's something my soul is wanting to learn, and, teach me this, show it. And not more than a week later, a friend I had at the time walked up and put a book in my hand, and she said, you need to read this. I hadn't been talking to her. I hadn't been talking to her about what I was struggling with. I had a question. I didn't know how to ask. I didn't even know what the question was, let alone how to ask it, but I could feel it in my spirit. It was just, and it felt like it was just ripping me apart. But I hadn't talked to anybody. Oh, maybe I talked to William. I must have talked to William, but I hadn't talked to anybody else. And then this friend came and said, you need to read this book. And it was a book that answered my questions, and it was about magic and how magic works, and it was beautiful and brilliant. And the book was Ask and It Is Given by Abraham Hicks, and it was perfect. And what came next was an avalanche of information. First, Ask and It Is Given. Then there was The Science of the Craft by William Keith. And then I fell upon the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? And then I watched the Rhonda Byrne's The Secret. And all of this information answered my question. And because it answered my question so thoroughly, I will never be that type of teacher that's like, I'm the end all to be all. You have to listen to what I say. Don't listen to anybody else as long as I'm teaching you. Nobody can teach me. I have a teacher. I have many teachers, but specifically Swami Tai is my teacher. So if you're watching this, Swami, I love you. Um, so I have a teacher, and then I consider because my ego is in balance with my spirit, I consider every person in my life my teacher. I consider every situation that comes up in my life. I was really looking forward to something. Something was going to happen in my life, and well, I'll just tell you, we were going to move. We were going to buy a different house, and we were going to sell this house, and we were going to move. And I was looking forward to that, and I was kind of daydreaming about it. I was kind of doing some visualization and some meditation on it, and then through a series of events that was absolutely could not have been avoided at all, that is not going to happen. Now, my wisdom and my spirit and my ego all dictate to me, wait for it. What is actually happening here? Is this a big, devastating thing that I should be all sad about? Or is this a step along the way? And see, I choose to believe that most events in my life, if not all of them, are a step along the way. That's the balance between my ego and my spirit. Now, was I disappointed? Oh, for 3 seconds maybe. And then I start to connect again with my divine self, which is in complete balance of the ego and the spirit. So your ego can obliterate your spiritual life and bring you into a place where perhaps you start to sound like a cult leader and nobody wants to be around you because they don't want to go that way. Most people don't. We're old enough in our evolution as a culture now, we know what those things sound like. And so those people who are ego-based, those teachers who are ego-based, usually prey on young adults because the young adults may not have heard it yet. I lived through Jim Jones. I remember laying on my stomach in front of the TV, watching that whole thing unfold and thinking he had this, for that time, I mean, now when we say mega church, we are talking about like football stadiums. But back then, he had a very healthy, thriving church. And he went to talk to someone who blew him off path with his own ideology. This other teacher had his own ideology. And it didn't confuse Jim Jones. It took him completely off path. And the path he wound up on was one of severe, deep, profound ego. Okay. So that's the downside of ego. So what I like to tell people about ego is it's a tool. It is a tool that resides inside of you. Its job is to keep you safe. And so when we see these people that are puffing up their chest and I know everything, you can't teach me, what is happening there? They're in a place that is safe for them. So those kind of people, I just kind of tolerate them because that is a symptom of something much, much deeper. So, but us spiritual people, us evolutionary people, have to first of all recognize the ego for what it is. It's a tool. It's a tool that belongs uniquely to you because it resides inside of you. And then the second thing is we have to learn how to use it. So what I started doing was when I was contemplating the next step, the next, I call it packet of learning, the next education that was going to help me move up my evolutionary process, I would hear the ego. I would hear it inside of myself. oh, let's stay here. It's safe here. You could get hurt if you go and do that. Remember how hard that was the last time and how long it took you to get over it? Let's just stay here. This is comfy here. When I start hearing that voice, I know that that's my cue to start gently going the other direction. And you have to really, really be in touch with yourself. You have to know, and here's a tricky part too. You have to know the difference between what the ego was saying to you and what your intuition is saying to you. That was a big trick for me, was learning the difference. And for me, what I started doing was, when I felt there was a certain direction I needed to go, and yet I didn't know if I was hearing my ego or if I was hearing my intuition, I would go very gently and cautiously in the direction of that aspect of my evolution. You can stand on the outside of something and see it and know if it's really where you want to go, or if your intuition is telling you, don't go there, or it's not time to go there yet. And for those of you who are in touch with your intuition, you know what I'm talking about. There's a difference. There's a difference in an evolutionary direction and a psychic feeling, a psychic premonition. So you have to really pay attention. And honestly, there's times I can't tell the difference. So I very gently go in that direction. I very gently go there. And sometimes I'll go there, I'll stand in the doorway forever and just watch that situation unfold. Just watch it unfold and see if I am supposed to be in that situation. Is that situation going to move me up in my evolution, or do I need to stay out of that situation completely? So I always listen to my intuition. When people say to me, oh, I'm not going to do that because I listen to my intuition, I do too. But I'm different about it, because sometimes I can't tell the difference between an inspirational urging from my spirit to go in the direction of something that's going to evolve me, or a warning from my intuition. The ego and the intuition, I believe, in the spirit, are in partnership. They are in partnership. If you know yourself, if you know your ego, if you know your spirit, and if you know your intuition, you're going to see how in partnership they are, and how each one of those aspects of our personality are all doing their job. They're doing their job, and they are brilliant at it. It is up to us as evolutionary beings to get to know them and to get to know the difference. I have the same feeling in my body when the ego is warning me not to do something because, we want to stay here because we're safe and it's comfy here. I have the same feeling in my body with that as I do with my intuition, that is like, don't do this. There are bad things to come if you do this. Okay. So, it's really important. I've had students where I'm like, you got to get to know yourself. That was one of the laws of magic, was that you have to know yourself. Meditate, practice silence. This will bring you into the deepest knowledge of yourself. This will bring you into the deepest knowledge of your ego and your spirit and your intuition. Swami Tai says that intuition is an agreement between our head and our heart, that the logic and the emotion come into balance. Okay, so it's a process. I understand that it's a process, and I know that everything I've talked about so far is an energetic process. But this is really, really powerful. And really, the knowledge of your ego and your spirit and your intuition comes with what concept have I been teaching? Think about it for a moment. It comes with self-love. So when you get into that place of deep, abiding, profound self-love, then these things become easier to hear. They're always talking to each other, and they're always talking to you, because one of them's job is to protect you and to keep you safe, but more to keep you comfortable and to keep you where you're at. The other one is a cliff diver. Your spirit, when it comes to spiritual things, now your spirit's not going to be like, oh, we can learn a bunch by jumping out of an airplane. Your spirit's never going to tell you that, but your spirit is going to tell you, oh, let's take this job or get into this relationship, or we're going to do this action or this activity. And that's going to advance our spirit. And then it's the intuition's job to know, to be able to read the vibrations that are coming at you concerning both the concerns of the ego and the desires of the spirit. So it's complicated. It's a process. It starts with self-love. Meditation is your greatest tool in navigating between the three of these things. Knowing yourself is the one thing that meditation will do for you, is that it will put you in direct contact with who you are. Before I started meditating, if somebody would have said, well, tell me about Ayla, I'd have been like, well, ask some questions. Ask me whatever you want to ask me and I'll answer the questions. After I started meditating, I wrote a book. I wrote a book about Ayla. So it's like this self-love and this meditation, and we do this. Remember this? Okay, we come face to face with the divine. Who do you think is the divine? You are an aspect of the true living source energy. You are made out of the same stuff. And then your three-dimensional person is here, and we do this. Okay? The three-dimensional person is the person who came here into this life, into this amazing maze of stuff to learn and stuff to experience. And the reason you came here was, I believe the reason we come here is to learn how to have fun. I think that's the main reason. But all the concepts that I have been teaching help you have fun. They sound very serious, don't they? And kind of they are, but it's like when we love ourselves, when we are in touch with ourselves, when we understand how to navigate this thick, dark, third-dimensional reality, we are a lot more likely to have fun. We are a lot more likely to learn how to have fun and to have those experiences that are fun experiences, and then to have those experiences that maybe be a bit uncomfortable and move us into a new evolutionary level, and then we can go back to having fun. So I know that sounds extremely simple and simplified, but think about it. It's like we've got to have our experiences that help us move up the ladder, move down the spectrum, or however you look at it. We're going to have those experiences. I think you have those experiences. They're just a byproduct of being in this third-dimensional life. But then the flip side of that is having fun. So that's really all I have to say today. This is probably not a very, oh gosh, I've been talking for almost 30 minutes. So what I want to say is please like and subscribe. I have a website now, magicallifewithayla.com, and there's all kinds of fun things to do on there, and to look at. And the healing yoga video with Brittany Ryan from Sacred Temple Healing, we are going to film that this coming Friday on the 10th. And I will have it up that night or the next day. It just depends on how quick the editing goes. But that's going to be a lot of fun as well. So that's it. And I'll see you next time. I love you. Blessed be.